From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Bit of a palate cleanser tonight. We have heard from many of our fellow conspiracy realists who are always asking us for more cryptid explorations. Now, longtime listeners, you know we've examined cryptids in depth. What are some of the episodes? I'll always remember our pal who runs Expedition Bigfoot. That was a great interview.
I love the wistful way you said, we'll always remember Expedition Bigfoot. You know, it was a golden time in all of our lives, I think.
Let's see. We also looked at cryptids in Indonesia, right? The Ahul.
Oh, geez, that was well. What was another one? Oh man, there was the spooky fans. Remember the spooky fans that were killing everybody that we sort of lumped into cryptids because there was like there was a ghost at play, perhaps
in South Korea.
That's right.
Yeah, and now we are traveling this evening to a place that has its own largely unique population of alleged cryptids that many people in the West have not heard of. I mean, you've heard of the region, you've heard of India and Pakistan and Afghanistan, but you may not know they have monsters all their own. One of which is just, by the way, spoiler, extremely adorable. We'll get to it. Here are the facts. For anyone unfamiliar, we'd like to give you just a quick and dirty understanding of what cryptids are and why they fascinate us so.
Cryptids are sneaky animals that might exist. That's how I would define a cryptid.
That's what cryptid translates to, actually, in Latin, is sneaky animal.
Yeah, it's a group term for any number of organisms that are alleged to exist or believed to exist outside the bounds of modern acknowledged scientific consensus. And these are very old, everybody has their own version of Bigfoot, as we'll see. There are also more regional cryptids like the Jersey Devil. Neither of those have been proven to exist, but every year there are dozens, if not hundreds of people who believe that they have seen one.
Well, and I mean, it's all so tightly wound up in folklore and tradition of different cultures. And a lot of times there's a belief in these creatures that stems from either kind of superstition or even religion sometimes. And that leads to, perhaps without proof, a genuine belief in some parts of the world in these things existing.
Well, and every once in a while, as we're going to find in this episode, as we have in the past, there's a documented sighting of something, and the way it's written about in that first documented sighting, it's so mysterious and strange that it creates its own lore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a real umami to it, right? Because humans seek to understand the world around them. And there are few things as intellectually tasty as the ability to discover a new animal.
You did promise a palate cleanser, Ben, so this is going to be sort of a chicken noodle soup for the conspiratorial soul here today.
Yeah.
I like that phrase. Yeah, we were talking about this off air. We wanted to do one fun one because we have deep water behind us and ahead. There's also a lot of scientific basis to the idea of cryptids. You know, some cryptids, the most plausible ones, turn out to be animals that we already knew existed, and perhaps society, often Western society, mistakenly concluded these animals were extinct. Our number one example of this is the coelacanth. They were supposed to have died out millions of years ago, and then, surprise, surprise, some Western scientists got over to the part of Africa where the coelacanth is still very much alive, and they said, "Oh, we've proven a cryptid. And all the people who were living in that area were like, no, this ugly fish has always been around. You can't eat it. It's a trash fish. And they were like, no, history, and we're writing it.
But isn't there even a specific Indian coelacanth that we heard about for this episode?
Yes, there very much is. And we are going to, in the course of this exploration, introduce you, fellow conspiracy realist, to an amazing map that inspired a lot of this conversation. There are other cryptids, like the Tasmanian tiger, still officially considered extinct, but every single year, a few people in Australia or Tasmania are certain they have seen one alive in the wild. It's the study of cryptozoology is a study of human encroachment into wilderness. And it's also weird. Like, we think when you see stuff on the History Channel or Discovery ID or whatever, you get the sense that cryptids are kind of a modern concept, but it turns out over the course of history, every single human culture has been fascinated by the story of fantastic creatures. And often it's because they were just working with what they had.
I mean, y'all, even some of the ones we know about, one could argue, are pretty fantastic. Can you imagine seeing some of these for the first time or catching a glimpse, before there was scientific basis to explain, the nature of connection between different species and phyla and kingdoms and all of that good stuff? Pretty wild.
Even something as simple as you live in an area and nobody you've ever known has ever seen a big cat in anywhere near where you are. But and there's no writings about big cats. There's no official big cats anywhere near you. But then you swear you experienced seeing one and hearing one out in the woods. Like, you did. And what do you tell your friends? And what does that turn into? And it's the same with big reptiles, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is the same with reptiles. As we'll find, there are still reptiles out there to be discovered. An interesting side note for a different thing, I recently learned that some reptiles may indeed be capable of what mammals would recognize as affection. Story for another day. Dude, have you ever seen a guy walking around holding a bearded dragon just on their chest? There's love in those eyes. I've seen it.
I recently saw this video of a guy who he's out on the swamp. He's taking some people on a tour, I think. And he tells them about this swamp puppy. You seen a swamp puppy? And they're like, what? And it's an alligator. He basically calls a wild alligator over to the boat, gives it some chicken.
Do you have a kind of whistle, like a call, an alligator call?
He's just talking to it like it's a dog, man. And he's just patting it on the nose. Like, you just pat him right on the nose. And if they ever come at you biting him, you just pop them right in that nose. They'll
little
let
piece
go.
of chicken, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys, I don't know if this was like a common thing in Georgia. I think this guy might have made the rounds, but there was this dude named Okefenokee Joe.
Yes.
Who would come to my elementary school.
Yes.
He always talked about being swamp wise.
Dude,
talked about being swamp wise.
Did he tour every school?
He had to have, dude.
He went to all
Maybe it was
of
like Santa
our
Claus. There's more than
schools.
one. Maybe there's like various Okefenokee Joes. Who knows?
Like
I doubt
psychics calling themselves Madame Belle. Perhaps it's a brand name. Yeah.
It could well be.
We know also that, first off, we're establishing here that the human species has a lot to learn about other non-human animals. And humans are still very much animals. They're a type of primate. We know that the humans have been attempting to explain the world around them since they started peopling. And so some of your favorite mythologies, some of your favorite legends, they originate from prototypes of scientific investigation. One of the most famous would be the legend of the Cyclops, the giant with one eye instead of two. That most likely came from the discovery of the skull of an elephant and the misinterpretation. We talked about this in the past. If you look at an elephant's skull, you can look at the big hole in the middle where the trunk is and think, yeah, that's where I would put an eye if I was God.
Man, I was hoping there was some kind of proto-man that definitely had one eye. That was a real thing. Oh,
There have been a couple. Non-consensually. But
fair enough.
Yeah, we know some cryptids also are the result of the great game of telephone, oral communication, mistranslation, embellishment. One person travels from beyond the bounds of their known part of the world And then they see some amazing animals, perhaps in Asia, perhaps in Africa, perhaps in what we call the Americas. They come back, they tell their colleagues, they tell their peer groups, and the colleagues start to tell other people the story. And every single time they tell the story, they embellish it a little bit, they exaggerate a little bit, they might even twist it around to support whatever their pre-existing ideology is. You know, the weirdest thing is, there are scammers now in the modern evenings talking about cryptids as a way to sort of bait and switch folks. But for most of human history, so far as we know, these people were not trying to pull a scam. These early philosophers, these historians, these proto-scientists, they wanted to understand the world around them, and they got it wrong pretty often. But they still, even with everything that looked like a misstep, they still played an important role in the larger advancement of civilization. India is no different. India is perhaps one of the best land areas to find an actual cryptid. I mean, it's so old, it's massive. Yes, it has one of, if not the world's largest populations of human beings, but it also has a lot of wild country still.
I think this came up in another episode recently. We were talking about our friend Mangesh telling us a story about how his father, I want to say, or maybe it was grandfather, was some grandfather, like a minister of forestry, or was responsible for like overseeing a lot of this crazy, jungle. And he, really pointed out to us how wild so much of India really, really is.
Mm-hmm. We also learned the phrase megadiverse. We've talked about biodiversity in the past, but very few places are mega diverse. Right now, as we are recording in 2024, the nation of India, not just the region of that subcontinent, but the single nation of India has 7 to 8% of all of the recorded species in the world. There are 34 universally agreed upon biodiversity hotspots, and India has 4 of them. The Himalaya region, as you mentioned earlier, Noel, Indo-Burma or Myanmar, the Western Ghats, Sri Lanka, it goes on. But the question is, what else is out there now? Are there any true cryptids, unidentified life forms in India? Could any of these stories be real? We're going to pause for a word from our sponsor, and then we're diving in. Here's where it gets crazy. Yes, it sounds weird to think that the most heavily human-occupied nation on the planet could still be very rife with wilderness and animals, but it's true. Like if you are looking anywhere but the depths of the ocean, India is quite likely the place where you could find a real cryptid.
And I mean, in general, when we're talking about cryptids, not all of them are created equal in terms of their provenance. As we mentioned at the top of the show, there are certainly some of them that may have been misidentified in historical records, in writing and early kind of naturalists, and misunderstandings galore that played, into that game of telephone can really make something into something pretty outrageously cryptid-like. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's sort of there's a likelihood factor of whether some of these things are related, these tales, to actual creatures, or if the game of telephone just got completely out of hand, driven by ideology or superstition or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go to some examples. One of the most ancient cryptids in India and in Ethiopia is a little thing called the crocutta. To describe it, it sounds like we're setting up a bar joke. What do you get when you cross a wolf, a dog, a hyena, and a lion? Well, you get the crocutta.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a delicious pastry, though, doesn't it?
It does, very much so. Yeah. It's an ancient cryptid. It's described by multiple historians throughout antiquity, including our boy Pliny, Pliny. And it's weird when you look at what he writes in natural history. He is kind of the first cryptozoologist. Like the scholarly burden of proof is not really a thing. So this guy is just sort of like when Freud was making up psychoanalysis, he's saying, oh, I heard about this one thing, and I heard about this other thing. And then other people took his descriptions and they ran with it. As you said, Noel, adding on their own twist.
Well, and as we describe this thing, it's kind of fun for all these to play the game of like, well, let's filter these descriptions through the things we now know that science has explained. And what is maybe the more likely possibility of what this thing was, or there's the WTF moment where we don't really have a reasonable explanation.
Yeah.
Just quick side note from me, guys. Pliny is the dude that I've always heard as Pliny or Pliny the Elder. That's the like.
Correct. Yeah, I always said
dude.
Pliny. I've heard it both ways for sure. But I just,
okay.
Something about the mouthfeel of Pliny is fun for me. But yeah, that's the guy.
Well, isn't it so cool that guy was around so long ago?
Mm-hmm.
And we still like look to him as some of the original recorded descriptions of a lot of these things. As you said, Ben, this guy was all about weird creatures from different places because
clearly well traveled, right? I mean,
yes,
he wasn't from around here,
But he didn't. When you look at the translated, recorded writings of him, he's not discounting things. He's not immediately saying, well, because of my extensive knowledge of natural history, this crocata couldn't possibly exist. It's like the concept is, well, maybe there is something like that. We just haven't found it yet.
He's got such a hold my beer vibe. If you've read natural history, he's like, hey, bro, you know what I heard?
Yeah.
I heard there was this turtle that's like bigger than every turtle ever.
Yeah, but back in those days too, it seems like historians and scientists and philosophers, there was a little bit more of a healthy mix of mysticism in their vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was an acceptance of the impossible, right? They weren't always out to debunk necessarily, or they were even in some ways driven by some of these kind of metaphysical pursuits, more so than what you might consider a scientist or a historian, to be today.
The Elder would have been an absolute beast on Twitter, that's for sure. But and he probably would have hosted a discovery show like River Monsters or something.
And just to clarify, he's from Rome, right? Ancient Roman historian,
correct?
Philosopher, natural philosopher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, natural philosopher, which was a quality job at the time if you could get it. According to what we know about this creature, the crocata from Pliny the Elder, the animal was thought to be found most often in the rainforest areas of India and then parts of Africa, Ethiopia, we'll call it today. Actually, we'll call it Ethiopia back then because it's one of the oldest countries that is still a country. This crocata thing, it's definitely a quadruped. It's about the size of a mule, according to descriptions. It is known for hunting humans as well as regular dogs. And we know dogs were at this time already well domesticated, already speciated from wolves. The crocata had a lot of powers ascribed to it. It could change its color at will. It could blend into its surroundings like the predator. It attacked from the shadows. It could eat a person it could kill a person in seconds. It could digest them very quickly, and it had a voracious appetite. Perhaps the most interesting thing here is that it could mimic the sounds of human beings. There are legends of it going to someone's doorstep and then sounding like another person to get it outside, to get that person outside, and then eating it.
Yo, have you guys seen that movie Annihilation? Remember the part? I mean, it's there's a whole part.
The bear?
The bear. But it's a combination of a bear and it screams with the voice of a human, and it's sort of this like bear, pig, boar, alligator monster thing, this hybrid, and that's what I'm picturing here. And I'm also wondering too if like a lot of these takes, there's some fear involved. You're like, this is a thing that is absolutely terrifying, is going to murder me. And therefore, in my mind, I'm projecting the scariest possible thing that it could be. Maybe you didn't even get a good look. You're mainly running away from this thing,
Well, it's kind of, I mean, again, the way this creature is described as such a combo of scary things, it gives me those vibes as well. But it also really reminds me of some of the skinwalker legends that exist, especially out in the Southwest here in the United States, from indigenous tribes that have lived there for way longer than anybody who was writing stuff down about that. So I don't know. That alone gives me the creeps mostly, I think, the mimicry part.
Right. Yeah. That's where we edge into the supernatural or verge into the supernatural. Another complication in the legends, this crocuta is said to be able to change genders. And believe it or not, folks, we can explain this. We have to ask one of the first questions for this cryptid example. Could the crocuta be a case of misidentification? India does have large, dangerous animals. I mean, the tiger. Look, I am confident that I could PvP a kangaroo. I am right about that. I don't want to do it.
I look forward to this.
I don't want to do it,
man.
But if worse comes to worse, I've got the agility, I've got the thumbs, I've got the knowledge. But no one, or the vast majority of people, cannot PvP a tiger, which means that the population of India, going back to pre-written history, like before the recorded word, they knew about the tiger. They knew about dangerous animals. They did not identify this one. And interestingly enough, there are multiple historical descriptions post-Pliny the Elder of the crocuta being taken to Roman civilization. We know it goes, I mean, it's weirdly recent in the grand scheme of things. It was Common Era 148 when Roman Emperor got his hands on one.
So I'm just trying to backtrack a little bit to the swapping of genders. Is this maybe a case where, I mean, I always bring this up, but like the Brotherhood of the Wolf and the Beast of Godovin or whatever, and you're searching and hunting for this very murderous beast that you believe to be an individual, a single individual, right? And then maybe there are more than one. And maybe there's this idea that you're hunting this one thing and you think it's a male, and then you catch one and it's a female. And you believe that it's changed genders because it could only be the one individual that was causing all that havoc. But in fact, there are more than one, maybe because there's a lack of understanding. I don't know. I'm just wondering what could lead to that misunderstanding or that belief.
Quite possibly. We're going to solve it here. So for the historical record, we know how a book called the Augustan History argues that at some point the Roman Emperor Antoninus received one of these creatures as a gift. It was just like a flex, it was like, here's a fancy souvenir. And then later, another historian called Cassius Dio talks about an emperor named Septimus Severus who brought a crocuta to Rome. And Dio says this, quote, Indian species was then introduced to Rome for the first time, so far as I am aware. It has the color of a lioness and tiger combined, and the general appearance of those animals, as also of a dog and fox, curiously blended. So, okay. Once you get past all the weird myths, that game of telephone, we're pretty sure that they're describing the spotted hyena. And to your
tracks,
right? It answers the idea of imitation, right? The idea of imitating calls, right? Like a hyena laughs, etc. It also answers the gender question, because we know that female spotted hyenas, when they become the dominant members of their pack, I don't want to be too crass here, but if you look at the biology, the dominant female hyena, its clitoris will enlarge and will become fully erectile. So it would appear to change gender.
That's fascinating. Yeah, the hyena, that was going to be my first bet. Those things are scary, man. I mean, I don't know, guys. I always picture the hyenas from The Lion King because I found them to be pretty menacing in some of those scenes when I was a kid. That stuck with me. They've got this sloped kind of, down on their haunches, ready to pounce kind of quality to them. And you're right, that human laugh, almost like a mockingbird or something, or like a parrot. It almost does does have this sort of formant quality to it, like a human vocal cords.
And now I just have images of Whoopi as a hyena becoming the alpha.
Mufasa,
and I don't like
Mufasa.
any of it.
Yeah.
If you ever come back, we're going to kill you.
So we have solved then effectively one cryptid case, an ancient one. But let's move to other things because again, our pals, the historians of old, to my knowledge, they have all passed on. They wrote a lot about weird animals, and another one that is continually fascinating is something called the manticore. It's also ancient, but it's a little tougher to explain because it's got a weird vibe. It has the head of a person.
Right. Well, but again, to me, though, it feels like a continuation of the crocuta because of that human voice quality. Now, all of a sudden, it's got the whole human head, and you hear about the manticore and all kinds of lore and tantamount to fighting a dragon or something almost, you really do hear about, these brave knights or what have you that would go out to slay a manticore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got the body of a lion, the head of a man, and then in a Shyamalan twist, it also has the tail of a scorpion that can shoot poisonous darts. I mean, this looks like
a giant clitoris.
And a giant clitoris. This looks like a drawing that we would make when we were children, if all of us were children at some point. I mean, the earliest mention of it comes from another ancient historian, a Greek historian, Ctesias. He had a book called Indica in the 5th century BCE, and the actual...
Which means in the couch.
Right. And thank you for everybody who wrote in with sativa
we got to share those on listener mail.
Yeah.
Some really fun ones about indica versus sativa, and are they a myth? Anyway, sorry to derail, but yeah.
Well, no,
indica.
You're perfect, because Indica, the actual book, or the manuscript, is lost to time, and we only know about it because we hear other later writers, name checking it. Going back to Pliny, in Natural History, he has the following description of Ctesias and the manticore.
Yeah, he writes that amongst these same men, there is found an animal, I have to lapse into the voice, called the mantichora, which has 3 rows of teeth like a comb, the face and ears of a human, and bluish eyes. It is red in color, with the body of a lion, and a tail with stingers like a scorpion. Its voice is as if the sounds of the pipe were mixed with a trumpet, and it is a creature of great speed, which avidly goes after human flesh. Guys, the sound of the pipe mixed with this sounds like Jurassic Park Foley work right here. I mean, all of those crazy roars they did in Jurassic Park, a lot of those are combining different animals and sometimes musical instruments and drones to make these otherworldly kind of, roars.
Guys, it's making me think of psychological manipulation war tactics that we've talked about in the past. This is what I'm thinking about here, right? Where it's like, if you could convince with either instrumentation, like, imagine war drums, but in this case, some kind of horns and other sounds that you're shooting out at great distances when your army is gathered together behind a big wall, right? Or across a ridge. But you're making these sounds to make it feel as though there's a super creepy creature just across the ridge.
Think about warring people with wild animals, where they dress them up in like armor and things like that. Sometimes like rhinoceroses or what have you, elephants, even war elephants. People are hearing these sounds coming across the battlefield and only seeing them when they're in the thick of the heat of battle, and they might be hallucinating some stuff, seeing things that this armor or what have you maybe make them think are like actually parts of the animals themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with this guy, we see the game of telephone because those original accounts, right? The first one is lost to history as far as we know. The second one that name checks that original author goes on to influence everybody else who writes about the manticore without actually having seen one or what they thought was one. And to date, there has been no proven capture of a manticore. There have been no proven accounts of attacks on humans from manticores, despite their fearsome reputation. So in this case, our verdict at present has to be the following: unknown. Because there's a lot of wilderness in India, but this creature, the way it's described, does not fit our current understanding of biology. There is a much more likely cryptid that we should go to. We're walking through different flavors of cryptids because India has quite a few. We've got to introduce you to, I don't know about you guys, one of my favorites, the boatbilly, or ghost cat.
Yeah. Dude, this is another sick cryptid. Again, the Manticore, if you wanted to design something that was just the most terrifying thing, make the Manticore, especially if it's that fast with all that gear already attached
and
to
a
its
human
body.
face.
Yeah,
You
come
know?
on. That's too much. But just big cats in general, as we've seen in other episodes in the past, where the thought that there could be even just a mountain lion lurking in a place where it shouldn't be, it's horrifying. But this, how do you say it, Ben?
Boatbilly.
A ghost cat? A cat that's like hiding from you out there. It's not just in the woods; it's hiding in the woods.
Yeah,
I like just calling it the boot billy. It sounds a lot less
like
scary
that.
when you say it that
It's very
way.
Augusta. Yeah,
It's a wild
like,
boot billy coming at you.
it's often described as a cross between a cat, a dog, and a mongoose. So smaller than a lion,
The mongoose part cracks me up.
larger than a hyena. Oh, the mongoose is awesome, dude.
That's the
Licky
thing.
ticky tappy all day.
Dude,
Dude,
yes.
one of the most efficient hunters that exists out there doesn't give an F, kind of, like one of those honey badgers where, oh, I'm sorry, you're a cobra. Oh, you got your rattlesnake. Too bad, I'm a mongoose.
Coming at you. Mongoose, attack.
Well, they've got asymmetric warfare down. Check out our Northwoods operation episode where I think, if I recall, I went on a little bit of a tangent, kissing the ass of the mongoose. That's why they named it Operation Mongoose. Whatever. All right.
Can I just say really quickly,
Yeah.
I was talking about like war animals and all of that stuff.
Sure.
And I said, rhinos out loud because it was, in the movie 300. But apparently that misconception, because rhinos apparently would be very difficult to train and it would be unwieldy to use in that
They
way.
have terrible
But-
eyesight.
Right, exactly, that too. But there's a very famous woodcut by Albrecht Dürer, who's a very famous artist, and I'm not getting the timeline right, but it was definitely would have been representative of the time where there was like, massive battlefield, night type, warfare. But this wasn't real. And I don't know if Albrecht Dürer was doing that game of telephone thing and being smart, or if he really thought he saw this thing. It's another example of how this stuff can just kind of like churn up its own lore, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is a game. Well, let's do this part now. This is a game you can play at home with your friends, fellow conspiracy realists. Describe an unfamiliar animal to a friend of yours or a family member, and then ask them to draw a picture of what they heard you describe. And that explains to us, even now, you could do this at home. Even now, that explains to us so much cryptid lore. Because imagine someone's going, well, out in the plains of Africa, there is a creature that functions as though it was born with armor. It has upon its snout a great horn. It runs at its enemies. And then, they're like, all right, just draw that. It's basically producers talking to people in the 1980s, right? Which explains all those films.
Nailed it. No, you're totally right.
That's very kind. We also know that the bootbilly, and we are not native speakers here, is kind of a regional terror. People genuinely believe this ghost cat was real. We found a case from 2010, so about 14 years ago, when residents of a neighborhood called Sanjay Park, they had claimed a ghost cat was responsible for killing and eating 45 pigeons and one goat over the course of about 10 days. And the guy who owned these birds and this goat, dude named Faraz Dilawar Khan, he said, look, I have seen this thing. I saw it eating my pigeons. It is, quote, fat and broad with a long tail. It's black in color. It has a face like a dog and a back like a mongoose. Which, honestly, saying a back like a mongoose, I don't think that really clocks for a lot of people in the West. We're not mongoose experts.
Correct.
Is that a diss or a compliment?
I just want to be. I just
Girl,
want to be
I got a
honest.
back like a mongoose.
Guys. Speaking of fat and broad, I just wanted to give this update. I was doing a little Okefenokee Joe research, and I found out who he is, and he has a real name. And I'll just let you click on that link I just put in the chat, boys. That is the real name of the recording artist known as Okefenokee Joe.
Oh, Dick Flood.
His name is Dick Flood.
Wow.
Please. Yeah.
And he's
Richard.
awesome, apparently.
Richard was my father's name. Please call
The
me Penis.
legendary Dick Flood was playing and recording under the sobriquet Okefenokee Joe in one of Fervor's most accomplished artists. This is a record label, I guess, and he had a group called Dick Flood and the Pathfinders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. Let the floodgates loose.
I'm glad we had that shared experience, though, growing up, y'all. This is another thing that just brings us closer
It's like
together.
McGruff the crime dog, you know.
Only a
Also-
real human person that came to our schools.
Yes.
All right, don't ruin McGruff for me. That is an anthropomorphic dog. It's
With a real bad drug problem, apparently.
yes, with a real, you know what? Cool vibe though. Faraz Khan apparently gets fed up with this ghost cat eating all his birds, and maybe eating the goat was the last straw. So 10 days pass, almost 2 weeks. He goes to the local authorities. He calls the police. He calls the fire department. He calls the forestry folks. It's November 3rd around 10 p.m., 2010. The authorities all show up. They take this seriously. They get there. They know there are dead birds and a dead goat. And when they get there, they say, dang, this ghost cat ghosted us. It's probably out in the forest somewhere. We can't find it. It faded from the news. But the thing that keeps us captivated by this idea is that these people living in Sanjay Park, they are familiar with the wildlife around them. If they saw something, they would be able to identify it. They know what kind of animals might target livestock. And they said, look, we've seen wild cats before. This is not a wild cat. So in this case, our verdict has to be, again, unknown.
Well, it stinks because if you just had some wild, like, house cats, right? Even domesticated house cats that were hanging out in that area, they could take down those pigeons easy. Because
Sure.
I've seen it happen. I have seen a cat jump in the air on a porch in an apartment, just one of those tiny little areas, just jump up, grab a bird out of the air and just pull it down.
Go to
Those
town.
little fellas are like cruise missiles, man. They seek and destroy.
But if
Yeah.
you have people who have this, as you said, Ben, like, they know the difference. They see something that is not a cat like that. It's also not a cat like just a bigger regular cat. It's something different.
Not a cat like that, the new album by Matt Frederick.
And I think it's probably pretty clear already, but we're not saying these people were stupid either. We're not saying these people were like
Absolutely
all
not.
bugaboo and confused. They just didn't have access to the same wealth of like the whole of human civilization that we do, So they were having to kind of make it up as they went along.
Also, given that this is 2010, these folks are very well aware of what surrounds them, and they also want it to be an animal they understand.
Yes.
You know what I mean? This guy is not a Bigfoot fan. This guy is a dude who was out a significant amount of capital because 45 pigeons, that's a lot of pigeons. Also, do you know the going price on a goat? Because let me spoil it for you. It is kind of expensive if you live in that part of the world. It's like someone stole your car. You know what I mean? You're not happy about it. You just lost your Camry. And
Does this give you guys goat sucker vibes, like chupacabra type vibes as well? I mean, that's a big part of the reporting on the chupacabra is that it was killing livestock. And then it becomes this like boogeyman almost,
Mhm. Yeah. As a matter of fact, let's take a break for a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to introduce you to one of the most adorable of India's cryptids. We've returned. Okay, loris. You guys know what the loris looks like. It's weird. It's got big eyes. It's always kind of like...
He protects the trees, right? He's got a big mustache kind of situation.
Close.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Lords always look like... a loris always looks like it's scheming, like a raccoon. You know, they got hands. They're just close enough to human hands to make
meerkat
you think.
vibes, almost like a meerkat mixed with a sloth. Perhaps.
Yeah. Because they're even called like the slow loris or the loris. I mean,
Yes.
that's the way they're colloquially known, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it just makes me think of a sloth or just a cute little guy just chilling. Look, man, don't bother me. Just trying to get some fruits and some leaves.
He looks a little sad. He got big old weepy
big
eyes and
eyes,
these big old kind of dark circles around it. He looks a little hang dog.
It looks like he wants a treat. You know, It looks like it wants a treat, which we're fine with. This idea of the tailed slow loris is fascinating because it's originally reported in the Lushai Hills of Assam state, and there is an actual photograph of this creature. There are no extravagant claims about this. The primary difference between a tailed slow loris and the other slow lorids of the world is just that. It's in the name. It has a tail, quite possibly prehensile. There is a genuine photograph that came from capture in 1889 when it was a common animal. It was first reported in writing in 1908 or 1902, early 20th century. And the dude who captured these animals, got 2 of them, and then sent it off to his friends in London. He has a name we have to share with everyone. His name was Thomas Henry Diggs Latouche, loves to touch.
Ooh, okay. Yes. Okay. So again, we're just making it clear. The loris is a subfamily of primates, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like an absolutely, documented creature, but we're just talking about one slight little twist on the loris that turns it into a cryptid because we don't have record of this variation.
This is the way I'm imagining it, guys. I imagine this loris thing, but then I think about a lemur, and the tail of a lemur, just a very specific one.
Yeah,
I think about that, but that's not how they described and what the picture's a little hard to make out what part is the tail, right? I think if we're kind of objective about it, but the way it's described is like super bushy, right? Not like a lemur's tail, like different.
Right. Like a lemur's tail is often used for balance. Mm-hmm. Right, because they're arboreal, meaning they live in trees. But the loris here, the slow loris, they have kind of like a stubby tail.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes the humans are born with a vestigial little bump at the end of their coccyx. We're adults.
Some cats too, right? Or maybe. Wait, are cats born without tails, or have they just been cut off? I'm sorry, this is a dumb question.
I think they're usually cut off. I'm sure there are some stubby-tailed cats.
No, I had one. Which still exists. His name is Robert. He lives with our good friend Frank. I think Robert as well. But Robert had a little stumpy tail, and I believe that there are very cruel practices that involve cutting off the cat's tails. But I gotta wonder though if there are cats that maybe are born without tails, whether it be like some sort of mutation.
You might have accidentally adopted a loris.
Maybe so.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of all those times people have mistakenly adopted an animal that they thought was a dog or a cat and learned it was something different.
Oh, tailless cat's a genetic mutation, by the way. It is a thing. So,
it is. Okay, but it's a mutation.
You got to wonder if that's something that we see too, rare mutations that lead to this type of identification as like something that we don't know about.
Slightly prescient. Yeah. So the story is our buddy Diggs Latouche, he and his crew captured 2 of these specimens. They reported that they were familiar with them and that it was common to see this type of lorid around. They caged the animals, but due to their wait for it, slow movements. They didn't bother to escape-proof anything. It's like if you capture a sloth, are you worried it's going to run away? Not
Time
really.
It would take them to lift the latch. It would just like that scene in Zootopia where the sloths work at the DMV and like the stamp. It's so funny.
So they messed up though with this creature, which again is documented. There is a photograph. As soon as the humans turn away, these purportedly slow little guys saw their chance. They got out of the cage and they hightailed it quickly back to the forest. Since that moment in 1889, they have never been seen again. We don't know if they're still out there. We don't know if maybe they were a specific genre of life form that died out due to human predation or human pressures. But I like what you're bringing up, Noel, which is prescient. There is the idea, or there is the possibility that this was the result of an isolated mutation, an atavastic gene triggering tail growth in a small number of individuals, kind of like how Melungeons have creepy stuff going on.
Right. I guess that's funny because I think of maybe a mutation that would cause a tailed animal to not have a tail to be a little bit simpler mutation, but one that actually gives you a tail out of nowhere. Maybe that one's like more of like a super mutation, like it gives you like a superpower. And then you got to wonder too, evolutionarily, if the tail ended up being a functional thing, maybe that species evolves to have the tail because that becomes a desirable trait.
If you see one, don't kill it, don't eat it, don't pull a Darwin. Get a photograph. You know what I mean?
Such a flexer.
He totally ate those animals. Anyway,
he did, and he loved every bite.
So what do you think, gents? Is this going to be a two-parter?
It's a great place to divide it because we've got some coming up. There are a lot more in the super dark, kind of weirder realm, and maybe resemble some things that we know from other, even more United States centric views of cryptids.
Oh, dude, that map that we found that we mentioned at the very top of this episode has things like about creatures that have bioluminescence that shouldn't, creatures of all different shapes and sizes, and weird stuff that we got to get into. So yeah, we definitely need more of this.
Oh yeah, and I mean, just to tease the first one we're going to talk about on the next episode, the Monkey Man of New Delhi might interest you if you've seen the Dev Patel film Monkey Man, which is out in theaters now, where he's like this Fight Club type Avenger who is totally capitalizing on the mythology
Hanuman.
of this cryptid. Yes.
Hanuman, the monkey god.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Also, there's so much to go into with the Monkey Man. That's one of my favorites. We don't have time. We got to save it. We want to take a second and thank Truth is Fiction YT on Reddit. Truth is Fiction YT, your awesome cryptid map of India, helped inspire a lot of tonight's conversation. We have more stories to explore in depth. There's so many we didn't get to. Each of which has their own rich mythology, fascinating parallels to known biology, or degrees of symbolism, especially with the Monkey Man, relating to the societies in which those stories were told. We'll go into the feedback loop in a future episode, which is very important to understand. We hope you tune in. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to also tune in for our upcoming exploration of trolls, not the ones online, as well as, we can finally announce it on air, we're doing the reptilian conspiracy.
Yeah.
Fine. Like 10 years late, we're diving into the reptilian conspiracy. We would love your help. Tell us your favorite cryptids. If you are a person who has lived in India, if you have family in India, especially in some of the areas we named, we'd love to hear from you. We try to be easy to find online.
So easy. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy, that you too can be a member of. We are also Conspiracy Stuff on X, FKA Twitter, and maybe most importantly, I don't know, they're all probably of equal importance, YouTube, where you can find some really fun video content rolling out every single week. Conspiracy Stuff. On TikTok and Instagram, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
There is a phone number, and you can call it, and you can leave us a voicemail. The number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname, and then you've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. Please include whether or not we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in that 3-minute message, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
The folks who read every single email we get, be well aware, friends. Sometimes the void writes back. We want to thank everybody who has taken the time to send us fantastic pieces of correspondence. We cannot wait to hear from you specifically. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.